I think it's fitting, as an institute that studies Western civilization, to give the medieval period its due. And we are very fortunate to have with us a eminent scholar of medieval history, a Regents professor in history at West Texas A&M. Dr. Brasington is especially an expert on the High Middle Ages, on the development of European law during that period, and his most recent book, which is a compendium of text with commentary, is called Call to Order. Is that right?
Order in the Court.
Order in the Court. Order in the Court. So, Order in the Court, Professor Brasington is going to speak. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balch, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure and an honor to come down here to Texas Tech and to be able to speak this evening, to see also my very good friend, colleague, and fellow UCLA Bruin, Dr. John Howe. Thank you for coming. My subject is the Middle Ages and why they matter today, and I am offering an apology. That is, a defense and an explanation. Even at a gathering celebrating our Western tradition, this likely also seems a very daunting task. You may have noticed the quote on the announcement for my talk, a comment made a little over a century ago by Henry Adams. Already in 1910, the Middle Ages seemed dead and irrelevant. To Adams, medieval culture, symbolized by the stone statues of the Virgin of Chartres Cathedral, had been toppled by the dynamo, the icon of early 20th century science and technology. Well, now it's 2018, and the dynamo has yielded to the tablet and the smartphone. So why even pay attention to those who lived so very long ago, in a dark age? Granted, as a British politician remarked a little over a decade ago, a few medievalists, people like me, like Dr. Howell, like Dr. Soderbrad, maybe a few medievalists could be tolerated for ornamental purposes. Sounds like a fern. Ornamental purposes. Perhaps we could serve as consultants for Games of Thrones. No doubt he got some laughs, but I'll not join in. I am waiting for a brief moment of silence. If the laughing ceased for even a moment, the politicians, bureaucrats, and pundits might well be frightened by the still, small voice of history, even medieval history. That faint whisper condemns their false pride in the present. They think themselves sophisticated, those critics of the Middle Ages. They are not, and I agree with Richard Weaver, quote, "Many modern people to whom the word provincial is anathema are themselves provincials to an extreme degree. Indeed, modernism is in essence a provincialism, since it declines to look beyond the horizon of the moment, just as a countryman may view with suspicion whatever lies beyond his country." Those who believe the past, the medieval past, has nothing to teach them are country bumpkins. But we need not be. Tonight we shall journey beyond the narrow confines of our own day. We shall look to the far horizon and glimpse what Russell Kirk called the permanent things. These command our loyalty, an impossible loyalty. But first we must pass by history's ruins, the lost causes inspired by those very ideals. It's worth our while. Again, I quote Richard Weaver, "I am now further convinced that there is something to be said in general for studying the history of a lost cause. Perhaps our education would be more humane in the result if everyone were required to gain an intimate acquaintance with some coherent ideal that failed in the effort to maintain itself. It is good for everyone to ally himself at some time with the defeated and to look at the progress of history through the eyes of those who were left behind. Every university, I would add Texas Tech, West Texas A&M University, every university ought to be to some extent the home of lost causes and impossible loyalties. It ought to preserve the memory of these with a certain discriminating measure of honor, trying to keep alive what was good in them and opposing the pragmatic verdict of the world. So which medieval lost cause shall we choose? Whose memory should we not only honor, but take up as a shield and sword against the pragmatic verdict of the world? Let us consider Christendom. The term itself was unknown in biblical times and for a long time thereafter. But the idea was certainly there by about 400 AD, when St. Augustine warned in his City of God against assuming that one could build a truly Christian world. To Augustine, a Christian's loyalty should never be to this present city of man. No, the Christian's life was a pilgrimage through the twisted, troubled streets of this earthly city towards an eternal home where one day, a final day, quote, shall be our Sabbath, which shall be brought to a close not by an evening, but by the Lord's day, as an eighth and eternal day. There we shall rest and see and love and praise. This is what shall be in the end without end. For what other end do we propose to ourselves than to attain to the kingdom of which there is no end? Throughout the City of God, Augustine makes clear that this world, however grand and noble, would pass away. However, not all agreed. In the centuries to come, some were convinced the heavenly city could in fact be built by the hands of men. And by the millennium, it had a name. The project was called Christianitas, Christendom. Certainly among the most daring and eloquent of these visionaries of Christendom, was Dante. While his Divine Comedy traced the Christian's journey through the afterlife, Dante's treatise on political theory, his De Monarchia on monarchy, was very much entirely focused on this world. Dante argued for no less than world government under a Christian emperor. Its language would be Latin, its law would be Roman. Only this way could unity, harmony, and peace in this world be achieved. The De Monarchia is grand, perhaps the greatest medieval attempt to realize Augustine's City of God in this world. But Dante's dream and vision remained just that. His cause was lost. There would be no Christendom. A Christian Roman emperor would never again govern Europe, let alone the world. Like the Inferno, Dante's De Monarchia built a cathedral of words, brilliantly argued, compellingly presented, logically arranged. It remains a monument to the power of art. But art had little effect on the early 14th century. A world troubled by war, famine, and soon plague. Christendom was a lost cause. It remains so today. But let us now lift our eyes beyond the ruins of Christendom and search the far horizon of its ideals. As we lift our eyes, a quote from John Donne comes to mind. Quote, "All mankind is of one author and is one volume. When one man dies, one chapter is not torn out of the book, but translated into a better language. And every chapter must be so translated. God employs several translators. Some pieces are translated by age, some by sickness, some by war, some by justice. But God's hand is in every translation. And his hand shall bind up all our scattered leaves again for that library where every book shall be open to one another." No technology, however impressive, can change the fact that we, like our brothers and sisters before, are mortal, and we each have a page in the book. But on it are written not only the failures, great and small, of life, but also the permanent things. These render hollow the egotistical laughter of those who believe that history does not matter. Causes fail, but ideals need not. So we look up from our smartphone. We look past the dynamo. We look even beyond the cathedral. We glimpse faith, hope, and love. Faith. At the very mouth of hell, Dante and Virgil encounter, quote, strange languages and frightful forms of speech, words caused by pain, accents of anger, voices both loud and faint, and smiting hands withal. A mighty tumult made, which sweeps around forever in that timelessly dark air. Teacher, what is this I hear? What folk is this that seems so overwhelmed with woe? And he to me, this wretched kind of life the miserable spirits lead, of those who lived with neither infamy nor praise. Commingled are they with that worthless choir of angels, who did not rebel, nor yet were true to God, but sided with themselves. The heavens, in order not to be less fair, expelled them, nor doth nether hell receive them, because the bad would get some glory thence. And I, what is it, teacher, grieves them so? It causes them so loudly to lament. The world allows no fame of them to live. Mercy and justice hold them in contempt. Let us not talk of them, but look and pass. And I who gazed intensely saw a flag, which whirling moved so slowly that to me contemptuous it appeared of all repose. And after it there came so long a line of people that I never would have thought that death so great a number had undone. Behold, a shrieking multitude, excluded from both heaven and hell. They had been faithless, loyal to neither God nor devil, now condemned to whirl in limbo. Their destiny fits their lack of faith and purpose. They will wander with no destination, no point. Is our world so different? How many side with the fallen angels? Side only with themselves, and in refusing to find faith in God, their fellow man, in some sort of just purpose, follow the darting flag that leads to nowhere. Contrast Dante's mouth of hell with a story from the 6th century, told by Bishop Gregory of Tours. The place is Marseille, a city in peril. Quote, in these days, Bishop Theodore had gone to the king, but when he had got no hearing, he made ready to return home. Meanwhile, a ship from Spain put in at the port with its usual wares, and unhappily brought the seed of this disease. However, the bishop went to the city and shut himself within the walls of St. Victor's Church, with the few who then remained with him, and there devoted himself to prayer and watching, while the people of the city perished, praying for God's mercy that the deaths might at length cease and the people be allowed to rest in peace. The plague passed away in 2 months, and when the people, now reassured, had returned to the city, the disease came on again, and they who returned perished. Later on, the city was many times attacked by this death. So we learn from Bishop Gregory of Tours in his History of the Franks. No need for an imagined hell there. How would we moderns react? We who often ground our meaning in progress, in optimism. And let us not simply dismiss the story as a legend, a fairy tale of blind faith. For why did the bishop return to the city ravaged by the plague? Why did a remnant pray with him, even when prayer remained unanswered and the plague returned? None of this is blind. There is no miracle in this story. Yet they did not side with themselves. They stayed loyal. For besides their faith stood hope. Hope. In 1951, Ray Bradbury wrote a short story called The World's Last Night. Here he imagined how a couple spends the final hours of a world ending not with a bang, not even a whimper, just ending. They thought of all the other people in the world who had spent their evening each in his own special way. They went to the house and turned out the lights and locked the doors and went into the bedroom and stood in the night-cool darkness undressing. She took the spread from the bed and folded it carefully over a chair, as always, and pushed back the covers. The sheets are so cool and clean and nice, she said. I'm tired. We're both tired. They got into bed and lay back. Wait a moment, she said. He heard her get up and go out into the back of the house. And then he heard the soft shuffling of a swinging door. A moment later, she was back. I left the water running in the kitchen, she said. I turned the faucet off. Something about this was so funny that he had to laugh. She laughed with him, knowing what it was that she had done that was so funny. They stopped laughing at last and lay in their cool night bed, their hands clasped, their heads together. Good night, he said after a moment. Good night, she said, adding softly, dear. Modern people confronting a sad destiny, in a way even more tragic than Dante's Limbo, for they have no hell above. They have no heaven above. They have no hell below, just the void. Granted, there is here a kind of courage, but it is resigned. They laugh, but without mirth. No shrieks, just silence. No tomorrow, no hope. Please do not think that medieval people would not have understood this lonely couple on the world's last night. Do not think that those living in the supposedly age of faith did not despair. Consider an excerpt from a French poem from the 1400s. Villon sings the Ballad of the Ladies of Bygone Times. Where is that brilliant lady Heloise, for whose sake Peter Abelard was castrated and became a monk at Saint Denis? He suffered that misfortune because of his love for her. But where are the snows of yesteryear? And Joan, the good maiden of Lorraine, who was burned by the English at Rouen. Where are they? Where, O sovereign virgin? But where are the snows of yesteryear? Prince, do not ask in a week where they are, or in a year. The only answer you will get is this refrain. But where are the snows of yesteryear? Like Bradbury centuries later, Villon never mentions heaven or hell. There is a resignation no less poignant than in the modern couple on the world's last night. The grand ladies are gone with the snows of yesteryear, and we shall never know their fate. Trust me, there was doubt and anxiety in the Middle Ages. There was also despair. But others, like that remnant at Marseille, had hope. Hope grounded in the author of the permanent things. Hope, not optimism. For optimism in the fleeting, failed, lost causes of our own devising will always fail. So consider Peter Abelard, Heloise's tragic lover, whose correspondence with Heloise from the 12th century remain one of the most compelling, powerful witness to medieval lives. Castrated, disgraced, condemned as a heretic, he was forced to take refuge at the end of his life in a monastery. This was a man who knew controversy, shame, misery, and how quickly fame became infamy. And yet also hear his hymn, O Quanta Qualia. Oh, what their joy and their glory must be, those endless Sabbaths the blessed ones see. Crowns for the valiant to weary ones rest. God shall be all, and in all ever blessed. In New Jerusalem joy shall be found. Blessings of peace shall forever abound. Wish and fulfillment are not severed there, nor the things prayed for come short of the prayer. We, where no troubles, distraction can bring, safely the anthems of Zion shall sing, while for your grace, Lord, their voices of praise, your blessed people shall evermore raise. Abelard suffered, but he did not despair. For in his life last night, he believed he was not alone. One day his prayers would be answered. His story would not end. His faith rested on hope. Hope is grounded in love. After the night will come morning, and that dawn will be love. Every fall semester, I teach courses in Western civilization. We begin and end, fittingly, I think, with two catastrophes, the Black Death and World War I. Towards the end of the course, we consider modern thought, especially Nietzsche, who in denying God also rejected any absolute standard for morality. Indeed, to Nietzsche, morals, instead of being divinely appointed guides for life, were shackles the weak put on the strong. So we talk about Nietzsche. We talk about the modern world. Partway through that lecture, I suddenly stop. And I ask students to take out a piece of paper. This evening, I explained, there will be a knock on your door. You will answer it and discover a very well-dressed stranger parked by the curb is his car, the fanciest model you can imagine. He asks to come in and you reluctantly agree. He then makes a proposal. You can have unlimited, instantly accessible money for life. For the remainder of your life, as much money as you want at any moment. All you have to do is kill someone. No one will ever know it was you. The only stipulation is that your victim cannot be someone you or people generally would despise. For example, a terrorist. I then ask them not to put their name on the sheet of paper, but then to write down yes or no. Would you take up the offer? And briefly explain why. Over the years, most, thankfully, have written no, and have offered explanations that you'd expect. For example, that's not the way I was raised, or that's against the Bible. But a few, and to be frank, a few more every year, either say yes or at least consider the possibility. As one student a couple of years ago put it, quote, I don't believe in God, and this life is what I have. I get what I can. So sure, I think I'd do it. Now this may seem a very strange way indeed to begin a discussion of love. But I chose to point out that like faith and hope, our world rejects, sometimes quite brutally, love in favor of self. Again, it was no different in the Middle Ages, not just in Dante's fiction. The hypocrisies and horror of medieval history, of all history, need no elaboration from me. But love remained as well, and with it a very different conception of the person than the one held by Nietzsche and my anonymous student. In the 12th century, St. Bernard of Clairvaux reflected on the meaning of love. And I want to call your attention to how modern this sounds at first. Think of any number of television preachers and pop psychologists. St. Bernard begins by stating that the natural human condition is that we love God for our own sake. God, what can you do for me? God exists to do what I want. It thus follows, Bernard continues, that we love our neighbor also for our own sake. Our neighbor is the means to our end, nothing more. So far, save likely for the initial premise, which speaks of God, I doubt we see much difference between our day and his. Whether in the 12th or the 21st centuries, we may not kill our neighbor, we can certainly exploit him. For we are all that matters in the end. And that's Bernard's next point. The fundamental human condition is that we love ourselves for our own sake. So far, both moderns and the frenzied throng at hell's mouth would likely agree. But Bernard is not modern. He's not even medieval. For he will speak next of the permanent things. And nothing is more lasting than love. Bernard declares that we need not end with self, with the grasping narcissism of this world. Bernard holds out the possibility that one can discover that he loves God for God's own sake. From that moment, he can begin to love his neighbor, however imperfectly, for the neighbor's sake, because the neighbor is also created in the image of God. And in the end, he comes full circle to a completely different understanding of self. He loves himself because God loves him. Bernard's self is not glossed with the shiny veneer of self-esteem that wears off with the tribulations of life. It is not enlarged by the passing euphoria and optimism from winning. Whether or not you accept his theology, you may at least consider his anthropology, that human dignity does not seek self alone, but others. That authentic dignity and purpose find their source and end in love. The Latin word that Bernard uses is caritas, from which we get the word charity. But this charity has nothing to do with condescension, of deigning to help the less fortunate. Nor is it a compulsion or duty. It is what the loved, truly loved, do. And by way of illustration, consider a story from early medieval Ireland, one already centuries old, when Bernard put pen to parchment. It's from the voyage of St. Brendan, and the chapter is entitled, A Most Wretched Ghost. Then the wind turned and drove the ship southward through 7 days. And they came to a great rock in the sea, and the sea breaking over it. And on the rock was sitting a wretched ghost, naked and in great misery and pain. And Brendan bade him tell who he was in the name of God. I am a doleful shadow, he said, that wretched Judas that sold our Lord for pence, and I am sitting here most wretchedly. And this is not my right place, he said, for my right place is in burning hell. But by our Lord's grace I am brought here at certain times of the year. For I am here every Sunday and from the evening of Saturday. But at other times I am lying in burning fire with Pilate, Herod, Ananias, and Caiaphas. And I am cursing and ever cursing the time when I was born. And I bid you for the love of God, he said, to keep me from the devils that will be coming after me. And Brendan said, with the help of God, we will protect you through the night. On the evening now of the Sunday, there came a great troop of devils, blasting and roaring, and they said to Brendan, go from this, God's man. You have nothing to do here. And let us have our comrade and bring him back to hell, for we dare not face our master, and he not with us. I will not give you leave to do your master's order, said Brendan, but I charge you by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ to leave him here this night until tomorrow. Would you dare, said the devils, to help him that betrayed his master and sold him to death and to great shame? But Brendan laid orders on them not to annoy him that night, and they cried horribly and went away. And with that, Judas thanked blessed Brendan so mournfully that it was a pity to hear him. With the help of God, we will protect you through the night. For that night, not even Judas had to be alone. Brendan chose to be loyal, impossibly loyal, even to the most faithless of men. Brendan faced down the devils and the dark. Is this a legend? Undoubtedly, but its message isn't. For it's love. Conclusion. I remember vividly the first time I held a 12th century manuscript in my hands. At that moment, more than 30 years ago, all the years of training were transformed. For this parchment book had been written by a real person, a person who lived in a monastery that stood just down the train line from Munich in the foothill of the Alps. That's where Darlene and I were as I did my dissertation research. Just down the S-Bahn at Schäftlarn. In the 12th century, somebody had copied that manuscript. It was real. He had not only copied the law into the book, but also written comments in the margins so I could learn something about what this person thought across the span of centuries. Like me, he studied ecclesiastical law, one of the many great currents of our Western tradition. That manuscript became for me a bridge to the past, a living, powerful past. Walk with me. Find your bridge. In crossing, you will discover that history is not mere ornament, not trivia, not amusement. It is meeting people, finding the permanent things. The dead speak to us. They challenge, they comfort, they console, they confront. Are our lives so full that we need not seek their counsel and comfort? Granted, we cannot turn back the hands of time, nor should we try. We cannot return to Christendom. It failed then, it would fail now. But Christendom's ideals, found in the lives that I've shared this evening, those ideals have not failed. As I said earlier, you may not embrace the theology, but you can, I believe, declare allegiance to its fundamental humanity. By reflecting on those pages of life so eloquently depicted by John Donne, we can rise to regain ground lost in modernity's wasting storm. We can climb even higher towards the permanent things: faith, hope, and love. Stand on history's higher ground. Find there a remedy for our anxious world, a remedy no dynamo, no computer can provide, the remedy of meaning. And I'm certain that John Donne would have agreed with Alan of Lille, who more than 4 centuries earlier had written, "Every creature of the earth is like a picture or a book. It is a mirror of ourselves. It is a faithful mark of our life and of our death, of our state and of our fate. The rose is a picture, a fitting image of our state, a lesson on our life. For it flowers in early morning, and the fading flower flowers in the evening of age. Like a rose, our lives bloom and fade and die. But the meaning of our lives need not be taken away by time. It need not vanish with the snows of yesteryear. Let us be loyal to the dead. Stand watch with Brendan on the icy rock. Return with the bishop to the city troubled by plague. Sing with Abelard. Seek true, authentic love with Bernard. Yes, from history we hear the screams of the battlefield, the sighs of despair, the cries of fear. But we also hear the answering, defiant chorus of those proclaiming faith, hope, and love. And the banner of the permanent things will never lead us astray. And listen carefully. We also hear something else above the din. Laughter, ever ancient and new. The laughter that comes from joy. Thank you.